How do you know she can't get in here?
Shit, I've been living in this place more than 15 years, and she ain't never came in this motherfucker.
2022 was a pretty decent year for horror. I mean, we got Prey, X, The Menu, and Watcher, just to name a few. But there was one horror film that defied conventional horror tropes and continuously subverted audience expectations. A film that had such a change in pace that it almost felt too unfamiliar, but in a good way. And that film was Barbarian. And by the way, this video will contain spoilers, so you've been warned. In the film, we follow Tess, who discovers her Airbnb has been double booked with Keith, a guy whose extreme generosity seems way too good to be true. Tess and Keith decide to work out an arrangement overnight to stay in the house together, and the next morning the plan is to call management and get everything straightened out. But something ends up going terribly wrong, and by the end of the film, Tess is fighting for her life. Now, anyone who's seen this movie knows that the events that unfold demands your attention and the plot becomes extremely unpredictable. But the one thing that I always found to be the most interesting sequence throughout this entire movie actually wasn't the bashing of Bill Skarsgård's head, although that was quite shocking. And nor was it the unsettling reveal of the deformed mother figure who lives in the underground caves of an Airbnb, but it was actually the social commentary that takes place in the beginning between Tess and Keith. That scene, in my opinion, was the most thought-provoking scene of any horror film I saw in 2022, and I'm going to tell you exactly why as we break down those sequence of events in today's video. The scene begins with Tess arriving to the Airbnb to find out that the key has already been removed from the lockbox, and that someone is already staying in the house. Throughout this scene, we explore double standards, gender norms, and the contrasting psychological perspectives between men and women. After Tess realizes that there's no key, she tries to contact management, but no one answers, which makes perfect sense considering it's so close to midnight and they're probably already asleep. And we know what time it is because of the visual details the director included along the way. So while pondering her next move, Tess realizes that it makes way more sense to do her pondering in the car versus on a porch in the pouring down rain in a creepy pitch black neighborhood, which if you're a man or woman, I would definitely agree is the smart thing to do in this situation. Now once she's back in the car, she sees a light turn on inside the house, so she goes back to the porch, rings the doorbell, and while she waits for someone to answer, she can see Keith through the window. And from the moment Keith answers the door through the next 40 minutes leading up to his death, we question whether or not if he's a good guy or a bad guy. And although we already know the outcome, it's far more compelling to explore the journey and the director's choices that made us feel this way about him. So after Keith answers the door, this sparks the beginning of the endless dilemmas Tess will be forced to navigate, each one testing her instincts, trust, and survival in increasingly disorienting ways. After Tess proves to Keith that she actually booked the house online, understandably he invites her inside so they can sort out the confusion of double booking the same place. This marks Tess's first cautious decision. She can either stay inside with a stranger or return to her car and try to figure things out on her own. And although she does have slight hesitation, of course she walks inside and we get a really cool medium full shot panning as Tess walks inside the house as if she's leaving the outside world behind. And I love the fact that this film just does a really good job at feeding on the paranoia of small moments like this. Because for example, Tess makes it through the first night and she attends her job interview the next day, but this moment is filmed as though she will never return to the outside world, like she's walking into something she can't escape, and the viewers might make the assumption that this is a cliche horror film introduction where the first character introduced gets brutally murdered and then will later be introduced to the real main characters, but no, that's not the case with Barbarian. And fun fact, the studio actually made this whole neighborhood from scratch, and when Tess walks inside the house, this is where they actually transition to an on-stage set piece at a studio location, which is primarily the case for a lot of films when they're shooting scenes indoors. Unless it's a special case, then it may have been on site. So just in case you actually believe they were filming your favorite horror movie inside of a creepy cabin in the woods, well, they weren't. They were really filming inside of a model of a creepy cabin at a studio. So once Tess steps inside the house, we get a POV pan of her observing the environment. This immediately establishes a couple of different things. Well, first, it establishes that for most people, this looks like a fairly ordinary modern day home and non-threatening. Then secondly, there are no immediate red flags, no suspicious items left out or messiness. Everything seems normal. And depending on who you ask, that sense of normalcy can seem frightening in a situation like this. Maybe not seeing any messiness feels abnormal. It's a great way for the director to play with the viewer's expectations. At this moment, Tess needs to use the bathroom, but of course she's still on edge about the current situation, so she makes a polite request to see Keith's booking confirmation.
Would you mind pulling up your reservation confirmation just so I can see it.
In case I'm some kind of weirdo who's broken in here to sleep.
And this thought might not cross the viewer's mind at this point because Tess is already inside and the current issue was already discussed at the door. But this is what you call good writing. He's a complete stranger that could easily be lying about being there. Plus, she showed her confirmation at the door, but he never showed his. This is a character that requires more than just word of mouth to put her mind at ease. It's a first step towards establishing some level of trust, and her position is very understandable.
In case I'm some kind of weirdo who's broken in here to sleep.
The great thing about Keith's response is that he becomes a little defensive, which makes him seem a little guilty of something, and that's on purpose.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Let me just find my phone.
Even after Tess goes to the bathroom, still scanning the house for something that looks out of place, he walks off like he's going to get his phone, and instead he returns to the middle of the hallway to watch Tess as if he's plotting something. It keeps you in the gray on whether or not if you should really trust this guy. And once again, Zach Cregger is very creative with his camera shots in such a tight space, showing Tess slip out of frame and having Keith immediately fill that space, and we notice that he doesn't have that phone yet. It's almost like he walked away to pretend to look for it. Also in the next shot, we have to take note of a very important reoccurring pattern that's about to start taking place, and that's the close-up shot of Tess continuously locking the door. Now obviously this expresses how she doesn't feel safe, which is something we clearly already know. But the director Zach Cregger includes this moment deliberately and repeatedly to do two things. First, it gives us a consistent visual cue about Tess's evolving comfort level. Secondly, it trains the audience to now expect this behavior, so later when it doesn't happen, we understand why, which makes the unsettling event that comes afterwards more logical. While in the bathroom, Tess continues to observe Keith's belongings, but still no immediate red flags. She walks out and we get a cheap jump scare before he finally reveals the reservation confirmation to her.
Right. Yep, that looks right to me. Great.
Not completely relieved, but at least this proves that he's not lying about being there. Now they contemplate on the next course of action, and Keith makes a great point.
I mean, I don't know if you got a great look at this neighborhood, but I don't think you should be sitting out there by yourself this late. I mean, I wouldn't do that. If you want to hang out in here, where it's dry and there's a lock on the door, I'm totally fine with that.
Now, up to this point, things have been a little weird, but not too strange. We could technically call this interaction between Tess and Keith the end of their stage 1 interaction before they agree to spend the night together. So Tess agrees to take Keith's offer of waiting inside where it's safe to call around for a last-minute alternative place to stay. This is where their interaction begins to take a more intriguing turn, and we start to see the camera work become noticeably more dynamic and deliberate. And also briefly, just to elaborate on the stages I mentioned earlier, first there's the "we're strangers and I'm not sure if I can trust him" stage. Then there's the "we're still strangers but he's kind of charming / flirtatious and I kinda like him" stage. Then there's the final "he's charming, we're strangers, and I'm still not sure if I should trust him until it's too late" stage. And also keep in mind that the director says that this opening scene between Tess and Keith was inspired by a book called The Gift of Fear, and how it's basically about encouraging women to not ignore their internal intuitive alarm systems. He said it made him realize that women have to be on guard and categorize the behavior of men out in the wild, and how men don't have to do that. And he revealed how that made him realize how he exists on an alien psychic landscape to most women. And this inspired him to write a scene where a man and a woman would interact and she would encounter very subtle and almost invisible red flags. And as a man myself, I'd have to agree that many of these subtle red flags are things we're conditioned not to notice or simply dismiss as harmless. But for women, they can be signals of real danger. It's a powerful reminder that what feels like an everyday interaction for one person can carry layers of fear and calculation for another. Now, real quick before we continue, I gotta pay some bills, so here's a quick message from today's sponsor, Manta Sleep, the creators of the world's best sleep mask and sleep accessories. Manta Sleep is all about helping you recharge, promoting better sleep and power naps so you can wake up feeling sharp, focused, and ready to take on the day. And for the nocturnal community out there and the night owls, it's even more important that we get our necessary rest after a long night of movies and episode binging. And to be honest, I'm not normally a sleep mask kind of guy, but I do enjoy listening to music or a podcast to help put me to sleep. And also when I'm traveling or just chilling at home, I hate being disturbed by someone turning on a bright light waking me up. And a lot of times when you're traveling, that's just something you really can't prevent. That's until now. The Manta Sound sleep mask is actually super comfortable to wear, and that's the one you're seeing on camera right now. And with the flat built-in Bluetooth speakers, you don't have to worry about how uncomfortable it is to lay on your side with traditional headphones or AirPods. And then on top of that, you get these relaxing eye cups inside the mask that provide 100% darkness no matter where you are without having any pressure on your eyes. And if the Manta Sound sleep mask doesn't sound like the right one for you, they have several other sleep mask options for you to choose from with some other cool color variations as well. So I think it's safe to say that at this point, Manta Sleep has made me a sleep mask kind of guy. So head over to mantasleep.com and use my code Nocturnal to get 10% off your first purchase. And thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring today's video. And now back to our regular scheduled programming. So once again, remember, we're in the we're strangers and I'm not sure if I can trust him stage. And the first subtle red flag that Zach added to this scene was this.
Oh, by the way, I'm Keith.
Tess.
Tess. That's a pretty name.
Thanks.
Now, did you catch that or was it completely invisible to you? So here, Keith and Tess finally introduce themselves to each other. And Keith says, by the way, I'm Keith. And Tess tells him her name and he goes, Tess, that's a pretty name. And immediately after that statement, Tess responds with a very subtle and uncomfortable,
Thanks.
and I'm going to quote the director's comment verbatim about this moment. That's a totally inappropriate thing to say because he's injecting sexuality into a non-sexual conversation. Even right after this, Keith offers her alcohol, which of course isn't a smart thing to do.
Do you want anything? Want some tea?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's somebody left out a bottle of wine here, like a housewarming thing. And there's some nuts here too.
I'm okay.
And he's just being extra nice, which feels weird. Then he also offered her tea and she declined.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna have some tea. I'll just make you a cup.
But he ignores her response and makes it anyway. Now, I'm sure a lot of people might want to defend Keith at this time, but you gotta remember that Zach Cregger wrote and directed this scene in this way on purpose. These moments don't exactly make Keith a villain, but together, they create just enough uncertainty to force Tess into constantly overanalyzing and second-guessing herself. The director's goal was to use these moments to create tension, and then allow that tension to grow through the audience's imagination, causing viewers to create their own fear. Even after Keith points out to Tess that she'll probably have trouble finding a room for the night because of a huge medical convention in town, she sighs with frustration and exhaustion, and then Keith follows with a very phony sigh of exhaustion like he's just as frustrated.
There's a convention in town.
What?
Yeah, there's like some huge medical thing. I don't think you're gonna be able to get a room tonight.
Can't believe this.
And it just comes off as fake and it doesn't feel genuine at all. In a way, it almost feels like Keith is getting exactly what he wants and beginning to take control of the situation. Even visually throughout this scene, from nearly every angle, it's framed as though Keith is towering over her in a position of power. Now, although Bill Skarsgård is 6'4" and it's nothing for him to tower over his co-star, it's still a filming technique to have someone framed above a character to express a power dynamic. Even at this time where Keith is trying to convince Tess to stay the night, he towers over her and tells her, no, you take the bedroom.
Why don't you just crash here?
Oh no, I don't think that's.
No, you take the bedroom, and I'll sleep out here on the couch.
Zach mentioned how in this moment Keith thinks he's being chivalrous, but in reality he's actually being controlling.
And then tomorrow we'll call these idiots, get our money back, free stay for both of us.
And here's where Tess, played by Georgina Campbell, has a very convincing performance of someone being tempted and then giving in.
I mean, I don't know what else there is to do.
I can take the couch.
Now, the director has mentioned how one of the complaints with this scene is that some viewers didn't feel as though Tess tried hard enough to find somewhere else to stay. But he revealed that there was a scene showing Tess make several calls to other places, but that moment ruined the tension and pacing, which is why it was removed. And now here is where we enter the we're still strangers, but he's kind of charming / flirtatious and I kinda like him stage, with a fun little match cut with a pinch of visual storytelling sprinkled in. And a match cut is a type of film edit that links two similar shots to create a smooth transition, often matching shape, motion, or meaning between scenes. With this scene, we have a match cut between the dryer and the hot cup of tea on the counter. Now, the connection between these two shots isn't just the shape. I mean, sure, the circular window of the dryer and the ring of the coffee cup are both circular, but the other connection between these two shots is that they both exist because of Tess. Now, we later also used the dryer to show a passage of time, but that's something we'll talk about later. Here, we're seeing the dryer because Tess wanted Keith to wash the sheets before she slept in the bedroom, which is completely understandable.
I can take the couch.
No. Call me what you want, but there's no way I'm sleeping in the bedroom while a young lady is sleeping on the couch.
Well, No offense, but I kind of have a thing about clean sheets.
Then we cut to a cup of tea, which is also left on the counter for Tess, which is why the camera pans down and we see her in the shot. And it does seem like she's interested, but she still doesn't trust it. And that, my friends, is what you would call great visual narration. Keith brings her luggage inside and she quickly takes them away from him, once again suggesting a quiet discomfort with him touching her things. She goes to the bedroom and again we get to see that reoccurring close-up shot of Tess locking the door. Keith left his wallet in the bedroom, so Tess quickly sneaks a photo of his ID for safety purposes and later hands it over. And also Keith's height is listed as 5'10" on the ID, which is pretty funny considering Bill Skarsgård's actual height in real life. But Tess goes to clean up in the bathroom and there's a close-up shot again of her locking the door. It makes perfect sense that she's locking the door in the house with a stranger. We are just acknowledging this because the director wants us to observe a pattern that will change later. And another fun fact, originally Zach Cregger filmed Tess taking a shower here, but it was removed after a test screening. Many women found it unrealistic and stupid for her to do that in such a tense situation. And personally, I'd have to agree because Tess feels like a very intelligent and cautious woman, and that does feel out of character. But after Tess leaves the bathroom, she's met with another unsettling moment. Keith is sitting there seemingly waiting for her, and we soon learn that he stayed there intentionally after noticing she didn't drink the tea, and wanting to open the wine in front of her to ease any additional suspicion. And from here is where we now enter stage 3, the he's charming, we're strangers and I'm still not sure if I should trust him until it's too late stage. This new stage is triggered after Tess discovers some new information about Keith, and the director also does something very interesting with the camera work here once this new connection is established. Tess reveals that she's in town for an interview and it's a research position for a documentary filmmaker. Now Keith has never heard of the filmmaker, but he has seen one of her seemingly unknown films, and Tess is very surprised and impressed by this. She also discovers that Keith is involved in a creative artist collective, the exact kind of group her potential documentary job is centered around.
I don't know her. Has she done anything I'd seen?
She made a movie about jazz last year called Blue Easy.
Oh, I saw that.
You saw Blue Easy.
And from the very moment Tess discovers that Keith has seen the film, the camera shifts from an over-the-shoulder perspective to close-up shots. Keith has now initiated a new level of intimacy, creating an instant connection that feels personal, disarming, and just a little too convenient. That's why after this connection is established, our first cut is back to the dryer, which shows a passage of time. It stopped, but no one's concerned with that right now because things are going so well. Then we get a shot of Keith pouring her a glass of wine, something she denied multiple times earlier. They've even moved to a more intimate location, from the kitchen to the couch, and the conversation has now become more personal. This is stage 3. Even at this point, the film almost becomes self-aware, throwing hints and acknowledging what we've already witnessed over the past 15 minutes.
Okay, take tonight. If I had been the one that checked in first and you showed up late at night.
What, you wouldn't have let me in?
Hell no, I wouldn't have let you in. Do you think I'm crazy?
Tess even points out how she wouldn't have allowed Keith to come inside the way he did with her because of those gender dynamics we've already acknowledged.
But if I was dumb enough to let you in, you wouldn't even think twice. You would just march on in.
Also, there's a little foreshadowing here where Keith says to Tess that girls can rip too.
Why is it always the girls who get their hearts ripped out in these things?
Girls can rip. Trust me.
Actually, a subtle gag to how the mother later rips off the homeless man's arms. Their flirtatious night ends with Keith helping Tess with her sheets, and we finally get to see a break in that reoccurring pattern we've been seeing all night. There is no close-up of Tess locking the door. That's because she doesn't. They both seemingly go to bed and things end on a good note. That's before questionable occurrences come back into play not too long after. Tess's room door mysteriously swings open, and from her bed she can see Keith on the couch experiencing something that looks like a night terror. And at this time, from a first-time viewer's perspective, it may have looked like he was sleepwalking and opened her door, just once again adding doubt to the viewer's mind about Keith. Oh, and there's also one little fun detail in this moment that most viewers tend to miss that I'd also like to point out. So this sound right here is a kiss. This is the sound of the mother actually kissing or smooching at Tess, similar to a mother kissing her children goodnight. And that's just a fun little random piece of foreshadowing right there that's easy to miss. But anyway, Tess approaches Keith and startles him out of his night terror. She asked him if he opened her door, and he confusingly says no. And just like that, we are back to thinking that either something strange is going on with this guy or something weird or possibly supernatural is in this house. After startling Keith in a clear moment of confusion, Tess once again locks her door and goes back to bed. And another moment that's often missed during this scene is the door closing behind Tess as she approaches Keith on the couch. The director has clarified that the mother likes to come up and watch people who stay in the house, not to harm them, but to simply watch them and leave. But Tess and Keith make it through the night, and as I've mentioned already, there is no immediate opening kill in this film. The movie takes a completely different approach, and it works. The last questionable event that I wanted to throw in there is that once they're back at the Airbnb and Keith rescues Tess after getting locked in the basement and discovering the creepy rape room, she was frightened by what she saw and is now in a hurry to leave, but Keith wants to go see it for himself. Then after he convinces Tess to stay just in case he also gets locked in the basement like she did, we the audience are now once again not sure if we can trust Keith once he doesn't return. I mean, it could easily be perceived as though Keith is trying to lure Tess into the basement, because right after he goes down there, it doesn't take long for him not to come back and not to respond to Tess. And also, most viewers aren't really concerned about whether or not if Keith makes it out. We just want Tess to follow her gut and make it out. But once she goes looking for Keith and we witness him getting his head bashed in, it became clear that he was a good guy all along. And all of that extra generosity was just him overcompensating out of nervousness.
What? Do I look like some kind of monster?
And it was of course a brilliant strategy for Zach Cregger to use Bill Skarsgård's villainous reputation to subvert audience expectations. Such a thought-provoking scene in a film that's filled to the brim with tension, subversion, and the kind of layered storytelling that rewards you the more you think about it. Barbarian isn't just about the horrors below the house. It's about the quiet fears we carry with us every day.